This video illustrates some of the basic concepts about S-curves as described by Sally Garner, Adrian Bijan, and George Land and others. This S-curve pattern can be found throughout nature and is recognized by economists, scientists, and marketers alike as a fundamental building block in their domains. We start with the x and y coordinates with progress on the y-axis and time on the x-axis. Here is the S-curve pattern. One use of an S-curve is to explain how a new idea initially might have a low rate of acceptance and use. But over time, if it adds value to the larger system, or to be more precise, facilitates energy flow, the idea will experience increased acceptance and use. At some point in time, the idea reaches a point at which new problems surface, which cannot be resolved by continued use of that idea. One example is how humans originally organized themselves to ensure their survival, starting approximately 300,000 years ago. The hunter-gatherer model was useful when the game and plants were plentiful and the community was small and mobile. The earliest human tribes slowly improved their standard of living by learning how to create better spears, taking on different roles in the hunt to increase their success in creating a division of labor in society that enabled advancement through specialization. Their rules for success were captured and passed on to future generations through their societal structure. Each mode of living has its limits relative to the size of the population and quality of life it can sustain. As the population grows, the spoils of the hunt must be shared among more and more people, putting pressure on the system and its leaders to produce more. Topping out occurs when the return on efforts decreases and the population continues to increase. This results in tremendous tension and often societal rifts as different subgroups struggle to maintain their share in a time of diminishing returns. The usual human response, however, is to work harder doing what we already know. The idea behind the hunter-gatherer model worked, but only for small groups of people who were successful at hunting for their food, whether through the use of weapons to kill game or to know which kinds of plants were edible and which were not. The idea failed when the game animals moved too far or when there were harsh conditions that affected the food sources. The idea could not support larger groups of people, and it was not possible to establish stable living conditions in one location. Working harder at the hunter-gatherer idea could not solve the problem. A total new idea or metaphor was needed. Societies assume that their metaphor is equivalent to the facts, but this is not true. Metaphors are merely a way to organize facts. History is a game of trying to find metaphors that fit the facts while also making society work better. The new idea is often actually proposed while the current idea appears to be working well. It is not immediately seen as useful, and those who propose the new idea are often met with resistance. About 10,000 years ago, our mode of life shifted from hunter-gatherer to one based on agriculture. While the idea of growing food had probably been around for hundreds or thousands of years, it was in this period of time that an entire end-to-end system of planting, nurturing, harvesting, and storing food had evolved to the point where it could be a foundation for human life. Just as with the hunter-gatherer model, what followed were times of tremendous bounty and growth as the new patterns were established, implemented, and spread to substantially increase productivity. However, new problems surfaced that could not be solved by working harder at the agricultural model. While horsepower worked, it could not support larger populations and their needs. Transporting goods across large distances in this manner was slow and unreliable. A new idea sprang up approximately 250 years ago, primarily from the development and discovery of science. For instance, the study of electricity and of magnetism, and the synthesis of these two bodies of knowledge produced electromagnetism, which led to the creation of the motor, which became one of the ideas producing what became known as the Industrial Age. Humans could make more progress and solve problems through the invention and use of machines. The Industrial Age is actually part of the machine or clockwork view metaphor, which has dominated Western civilization for over 400 years, and it is highly institutionalized today. This model gained wide acceptance and is still the predominant mental model in our world. For instance, our education system is based on the factory model of filling the minds of children with information, not necessarily knowledge, through a sequence and progression of grades based on age. The machine view dominates our work, where our view of organizations and the people who work in them as a collection of interchangeable parts. The annual ritual of performance evaluation of people comes from the machine view. When things go wrong, we break the problem apart through analysis, study the parts, search for the root cause, look for the broken part or person, and repair or replace the part or the person. These kinds of ideas are now woven into every nook and cranny of our world. But new problems are surfacing which cannot be solved by continued use or working harder at the industrial model. For example, we are experiencing unsustainable population growth, climate change produced by human and industry activity, exhaustion of fossil fuels, and scarcity of potable water are just a few of the problems caused by the broad use of the industrial model. The machine view of the world is based on the belief that technique X will controllably produce result Y. People are beginning to see the limitations of mere techniques, precise interventions or formulas that they think will produce predictable, controlled results. Our culture is riddled with assumptions based on separation, separability, and non-dependence. The current prevailing view is based on the image of single isolated causes. We have built our society around machine world beliefs, but we are finding that they are simplistic and inadequate. Analytic approaches, one that break down, control, isolate, lead us to believe in simple causes, no matter how complex the actual process might be. The traditional belief that people can predict everything if they just have the right equation is simply wrong. A new big idea is already underway. A new mental model has been evolving. There are skirmishes everywhere as the economic foundation and our way of life shifts from blue-collar industrial work to white-collar, knowledge-based work. Science as a whole is shifting from a view based on independence, studying separate things, to one based on interdependence, studying how things are woven together. We are witnessing the end of the analytic era and the beginning of a synthetic, integrative, interwoven era in science. Classical science images based on single causality are crumbling. In their place, a new science based on web dynamics or interdependence and its organizing tendencies is emerging. Some have called this the integral, web, or systemic model. We are learning that we are in a web world and that webs don't work like machines. You can't understand much until you understand that everything is a web. We are learning that things are intertwined and that intertwining counts. One thing affects another, which affects a third, which turns around and affects the first. We are living in an age which has been undergoing this paradigm shift in worldview. What we are taught, how we were taught, and how we were treated in school or at work was based on the industrial view of the world. I use the word was, but I should say is. There is some evidence of a change in a new way of thinking, but it is not yet a common view. In the next slide, I will describe a timeline of how I see the healthcare industry trying to navigate through this new worldview. Here's a timeline with the current date, which happens to be 2015 on the right-hand side. I want to place this timeline along a model that most people might find familiar, a football field. I'll put 2015 at the right-hand goal line. I'll place the year 2002 at about the 15-yard line. This is roughly the time period that some healthcare organizations like ThedaCare, Virginia Mason, Seattle Children's Hospital, Denver Health, and a few others mark as the beginning of their serious work to understand and apply what is now being called lean. These organizations learn from other industries and consultants that introduce them to the model of management called the Toyota Production System. In 2008, the ThedaCare Center for Healthcare Value was formed as a 501c3 educational organization to help encourage more healthcare organizations to learn and apply thinking, lean thinking, and methods. Now I want to go to the opposite end of the timeline, to the other goal line, and think about what was happening in the 1920s. It was around 1925 that Dr. Walter Schuhart designed a method to distinguish the two types of variation that is seen in any process or system: common or chance causes of variation, and special or assignable causes of variation. This was important work that came from Bell Laboratories to help management to improve the production of telephones. He discovered that common causes of variation come from the production system and its many components and their interactions, and that improvement in future output will only come from study and improvement of the system, not reaction to the variations seen by single points or that were judged to be trends. Special cause variation is a cause that comes from outside the system and is worth investigating. The cause is assignable. Up until that time, management had been taking action on every occurrence of variation, common cause, and was actually making matters worse. This action is what Dr. W. Edwards Deming would subsequently call tampering. Deming, who obtained his PhD in physics, was a student of Schuhart's, and he learned about and then built upon the knowledge of variation and appropriate management action. Deming and others applied these methods to various industries, including transportation, agriculture, and the U.S. Census. This knowledge was instrumental in the World War II production effort, which allowed the United States and Allied countries to produce and distribute weapons and materials with high reliability and in an efficient manner. It was in the late 1940s and 50s that Deming was invited to Japan in the beginning to help with the census. His reputation for applying statistical methods for improvement to manufacturing and business was well known, and the Japanese Union of Scientists and Engineers sponsored a series of lectures to management and to engineers over many visits. Japanese management and engineers took his lessons seriously, and over a period of less than 5 years began to turn around their reputation for quality. Dr. Deming brought new knowledge to Japanese management. He taught them to see the companies and their country as a system, as well as how to correctly respond to variation in the output of their goods and services. Over a period of many years, through trial and error and application of the PDSA cycle, companies like Toyota developed management systems based on these and other principles taught by Dr. Deming and others. And this improvement continues to this day. Japan is an island country with limited natural resources. Japanese countries import raw material, add value through management and production processes, and sell their products with the reputation of high quality and reliability. They had to make this the best use of all of their resources. They had no choice. Their very survival depended on it. What was happening in the United States during this period of time? The lower half of this slide will represent the actions by the U.S. and Western world. After World War II, the problem for U.S. companies was not quality, but rather quantity. Pent-up demand starting with the Great Depression, followed by austerity measures during World War II, caused an unprecedented demand or increase in demand for goods. U.S. companies resorted to the old industrial machine view of the world to meet this demand, not the new knowledge the Japanese management was applying. Many proven methods like training within industry that helped to win the war effort were cast aside and forgotten. The problem was quantity, not quality. The industrial view model is based on command and control, centralized decision-making, dominance mindset, a win-lose or zero-sum view. The view is to treat the world as a machine and look to analysis of the parts, reductionistic thinking. This view extends to the treating of people as interchangeable parts. We were in an expanding market, and almost anyone who started a business was guaranteed to be successful, not because of superior management or knowledge, but due to the expanding market, in other words, dumb luck. The focus was quantity, not quality. Approaches to management, such as management by objective, were developed and taught, and are still taught to this day. A predominant mindset of this style of management is management results, as is ranking and rating of teams, people, divisions, and companies tied to reward and punishment based on the belief and the use of extrinsic motivation as an approach to motivate people to do better. Ranking and rating of organizations, teams, and people makes perfect sense. A focus on the individual when things went right or wrong, usually wrong, and the use of annual performance appraisal as a method for improvement. Deming called this style of management seen in the West as the mythology of management. Other terms are Sloan management, modern management, and scientific management. By the 1970s, it became apparent that U.S. automakers could not compete on the global market. The same was true for the electronics industry. On June 24, 1980, a program, If Japan Can, Why Can't We?, was broadcast on NBC as a part of a television show, NBC White Paper. This program is credited with the beginning of the quality revolution and the introduction of Deming's theories and methods to American managers. At the end of the program, Bill Conway, a manager at Nashua Paper Company, interviewed Dr. Deming and made this statement. Many of the programs using your methods have died in American management because they didn't get top management support. Now, why top management does not believe this is the way that Japanese have improved their industry over the last 30 years, I don't know. Here is Deming's response. I think the people here expect miracles. American management thinks they can just copy from Japan, but they don't know what to copy. After that program, Dr. Deming's time was in high demand. Desperate CEOs wanted his help immediately. In the response to the demand, he described principles of management the U.S. and Western countries needed to understand and embrace. These became the 14 principles for Western management, or his 14 points. He also described 7 deadly diseases and many obstacles. Here are principles 1 through 7. Here are principles 8 through 14. Here are the 7 deadly diseases that afflict most companies in the Western world. An esteemed economist, Carolyn A. M.I., remarked that cure of the deadly diseases will require total reconstruction of Western management. Again, a totally new metaphor. There are, besides the deadly diseases, what Deming called a whole parade of obstacles. Some obstacles are in fact candidates for front-rank ineffectiveness along with the deadly diseases, though most of them are easier to cure than the deadly diseases. Here are more of the obstacles. In the late 1980s, a group of researchers from MIT were studying the phenomenon they were witnessing regarding the quality of cars from companies like Toyota compared to U.S. car manufacturers. This work prompted a study of Toyota production system, and it was in 1987 that the term lean was first used to describe the reasons for the substantial differences. In 1993, Dr. Deming published The New Economics, in which he described the body of knowledge upon which his 14 principles for Western management were based. The system of profound knowledge has 4 interrelated parts: appreciation for a system, knowledge about variation, theory of knowledge, and psychology. This, I believe, is the knowledge we need to navigate our way in this new paradigm of management. I believe that U.S. healthcare has been, but is no longer experiencing an expanding market. Our country can no longer afford wide variation in quality and steady year-over-year increases in cost. The demand for a reversal in both high cost and poor quality is well underway. Many healthcare organizations are attempting to learn the principles of management systems that were first created in the 1950s. Some important questions, however, will still need to be addressed for healthcare. Is top management ready to let go of the prevailing style of management and learn an entirely different style of management based on principles of the new worldview? Are those who are trying to learn this new philosophy of management merely copying tools and methods? Dr. Deming's advice from 1980 might be helpful. People here seem to expect miracles. They think they can go to other companies and copy, but they don't know what to copy. Will healthcare management see beneath the surface and go beyond the mere use of tools? Will they understand the importance of systems and how these systems must be designed and redesigned based on principles from a new worldview? And will they understand the knowledge upon which these principles are derived? Here's a list of books for recommended reading on this topic.